Hello, this is Denise O'Connor with Pearls on Tuesday, and today I am going to share my 2022 DIY Easter cards with you that were inspired by Beatrix Potter. I really think you're going to love it, and you will have time to make some of your own. This is the 150th anniversary of the Tale of Peter Rabbit, probably Beatrix Potter's most famous story. Just a little blib of background concerning Beatrix Potter. She was born to fairly wealthy parents in England. She did have a brother who was several years younger than she was, but mostly she was raised in isolation, not being around a lot of other children. She was educated by governesses and mostly spent time alone, which she said in her own words made for a little bit of a sad childhood. Her brother was sent to boarding school early on, as boys were educated more formally than girls in the Victorian era. Because she was alone so much, Beatrix, whose whole name is Helen Beatrix Potter, because she was alone so much, she spent a great deal of time outdoors, becoming acquainted with all of the wild animals on the vast homesteads where she lived. These could be mice, they could be squirrels, bunnies, birds, and even a bat that her brother owned and left in her care when he went to boarding school. She spent so much time with these wild animals, even walking her bunny Pied Piper, Peter Pied Piper, on a leash, and he was the inspiration for Peter Rabbit in her stories. She spent so much time with them that she began thinking of them as people. Her connection between animals and people was somewhat blurred early on because she spent so much time with them. And that is why in most of her illustrations, her little animals have clothes, they talk, they reason, they experience things just like people would do. So Beatrix Potter began to illustrate stories and write stories. She mostly used pen and watercolor. And even from the age of 9, became very, very good at her craft. The story of the Tale of Peter Rabbit actually began as a letter that she wrote to a friend's young son who was ill. She wanted to cheer him up, so she thought she would tell him a little story. And the story was about Peter Rabbit, based on, as I said, her pet rabbit, Peter Piper, Pied Peter Piper, and his friends Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail. So the 150th anniversary of the Tale of Peter Rabbit, and an extraordinary woman, Beatrix Potter, who was a naturalist, a conservationist, a nature lover, an author, and an illustrator. So, how did I create my DIY Easter cards this year using a Beatrix Potter theme? Well, another thing that I've been into a lot lately is assemblage and collage. So I knew that I wanted to make cards that were in the theme of collage or assemblage using any of the crafting materials I happen to have on hand, and put forth the Beatrix Potter theme for this Easter. So I purchased these packs of cards and envelopes by Recollections. You get about 10 in a pack, various types of paper. These happen to be the brown newspaper bag kind. These, I have white and off-white. I even have some pink, but you can find them at just about any craft store, and I keep these on hand at all times. So this was what I used as the card itself, and it comes with the envelope. So the next thing that I did was to go through my collection of Beatrix Potter books. These belonged to my children when they were young, and they're in their 30s now. And I went through and made some copies on my printer of some of the beautiful illustrations inside and the pages and text that went with them. Okay, so I just printed that out on regular copy paper. The cards themselves are fairly sturdy, so I didn't feel that I needed to do this on cardstock. The next thing I did was choose a font that I liked and typed out Happy Easter in a variety of sizes and printed out a few sheets of those. And then I gathered my materials. For background or backing, I use old pieces of sheet music of all kinds that I tear out of books or save from other projects. I have several books of this scrapbooking paper that has all kinds of pages of various prints and patterns of all colors to choose from. I got out lots of different kinds and colors of Easter ribbon that I might want to use and embellish with. Lots of little sequins, flowers, little puffs, crystal dots, you name it. Pipe cleaners of all shapes and sizes, old bits and baubles of jewelry that I use to craft with. Of course, my trusty pair of scissors. And what I love the most, I constructed these with my Aleene's tacky glue. This is my go-to favorite. It adheres well, it dries quickly, it does the trick, and I didn't even use a glue gun on this project. I also pulled out a bunch of my Nanny's vintage buttons. I have them separated into colors. I pulled out the whites and off-whites, the pinks and reds, the blues, the yellows and oranges, and a miscellaneous bag. So, on the inside of each card, I used the same picture, which is on the inside of each one of my little books, and I liked it because it kind of forms a frame of various Beatrix Potter characters. Then I put some kind of embellishment up here. This one happens to have a piece of lace and then one of the Happy Easter printouts, and I signed the inside. So all of the insides look this way with various kinds of embellishments and greetings. Here's one where I use the same paper that I used on the front. And so on the front of each card, I began creating some collages and just kind of place things where I felt they fit, they balanced, and looked nice. The pictures go along with the words, because in my books, the pictures and words are on opposite pages. And then I just used all different things that I had on hand, things that I just showed you to embellish the front. I did put a piece of backing of some kind on each one. I went over the whole thing once it was finished with Mod Podge using one of these little sponge brushes. Of course, I didn't brush over top of buttons and flowers and that kind of thing, just over the paper part. It gave it a nice sheen and a nice weight. You can see the sheen if I turn it, the light to a certain angle. And lastly, I used some gold and silver glitter glue and a little brush to brush on some embellishments to give it a little more shine. Now, I think the light is good on this one. Some of them show up better on camera, better than others, but they really turned out nicely. On the back of each card, I have a stamp that says handmade by, and I just write my name and the year. Here's my little stamp, and I just used, you know, a regular stamp pad. But I think of all the DIY cards that I have done in the last couple of years, these turned out to be my favorite. I'm going to move my camera and give you a glimpse, an up-close glimpse of all of my cards. I am looking forward to mailing them out and surprising my family and friends with this little Easter treat. I wanted to share a couple pieces of my children's Beatrix Potter Wedgwood, made in England. These may look familiar to some of you. This was a little porridge bowl that we used to feed our little children out of, and this precious little cup. And I can remember setting the table at Easter and having them actually use these when they were little. So happy 150th anniversary of the Tale of Peter Rabbit. Look into Beatrix Potter. There are some great, fairly short documentaries about her on YouTube that I think you will enjoy. She was an extraordinary woman. Her life was much more rich and involved than just her writing and her illustrations.